Evangelism and cross-cultural ministry, that's our topic this week. I'm Bill.
And I'm Aaron Mamuyak.
So today we're going to look at a case study of someone who has been hanging around our church, and we're going to consider the book Graceful Evangelism, and we're going to look at that for some concepts that may illuminate this person's life, how God is active, and how we might do effective modern evangelism with them.
We talked with Che for a few minutes, about 20, 30-minute interview, and here's a look into his spiritual journey. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Che Dugossier. I am 31 years of age, and I was a firefighter for over 10 years.
Awesome.
And now I moved back here to Florida, to aid my parents and my little brother. So single,
And would you consider yourself a spiritual person, a religious person?
I would say somewhat. I kind of actually, stepped away from that because of my beliefs were pretty much unstable, for God, man, because of things I was seeing, through the time when I was really young. I mean, one of the examples is, I was telling these guys about 9/11, man, I mean, bad things would happen to good people, you know what I mean? And why these things were just like happening, So actually that, just seeing so much things happen, like kids are, dying and stuff like that. I mean, what is it to that, for them to, go through that, I mean, we're God's children, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why do they have to go that way, you know what I mean? So things like that, actually, that pretty much bothered me. And you see people going through these things like that, you just question it, you know what I mean? But you never get an answer, I mean, there are times I've asked someone about, like, I mean, that kid is like 2 years old, he just died, I mean, what's the question? I mean, what are the, what's the answer to that, It's just that you can never get an adequate or accurate answer pertaining to that, I mean, it's just a kid, just totally innocent. Why did he deserve that?
So it seems like, did you have a religious upbringing? Were you brought up in a religious home?
Yes, my parents actually, they've been religious, for a really long time. And I've been going to church, but I just never, like, I was a kid, I just didn't, take it seriously. It just didn't make sense to me because of the fact that, we are God's people, why these things are happening to us.
Can you just describe your spiritual journey?
My spiritual journey is to just like, just to follow commands, be obedient, and to, get closer to God as possible.
Does the Bible have any errors in it? Do you think the Bible has any errors in it?
I have no idea, because I like I said, I still haven't read as much scriptures as I need to,
Right.
So that's one of the things I just need to embark on, to maybe answer that question.
Yeah. Do you believe that Jesus was God?
No.
Okay. How do you, if someone were to ask you, how do you know you're going to heaven? What would you say?
I'm going to heaven as long as I don't kill myself. Especially just, like I said, just being obedient, just following God's word.
What are your biggest sources of comfort?
Well, actually, just not thinking about it as much. You get what I'm saying?
Huh.
Like, it just like, these things that happen, is just trying not to think about it too much. Or, just talk to somebody about it. That's why, as a firefighter, we go through this debriefing. It's like, some incident just happened. If it bothers you so much, you have to talk to your, officer. They give you some time off, and they actually send someone to, to actually sit with you and go over it, to actually, find a way and find some clarity to, kind of get it off your mind, somebody just to talk to. But, really it's just like, I try not to think about it, but.
What are your, like, views of Christians? Or maybe some of your positive or negative interactions with Christians?
Yeah, about that too. Most of the times I thought that Christians are pretty much, they're all hypocrites and stuff like that. They like to judge people, and thing is, I just pretty much, I just didn't want to be around that, you know what I mean? Because I thought Christians would be just like, more of a calm and, just collective people that actually just want to bring you in and want to teach you what they know, opposed to just like, making that judgment, because of who you are or what you've done or whatever, So that's what I mostly thought about, Christians. They're just being phony. But
If I were to say, I would give you a percentage. Give me a percentage here. What percent of Christians are hypocrites, and what percent of Christians are like actually following the Bible? What would you say?
I think hypocrites would probably be a low percentage. More like between Christians are like 70, maybe the hypocrites probably like 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's mostly positive?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Based on your perception of Christians, what kind of advice would you give to Christians?
Just need to read more. Read more, and and not judge anyone. Just let them be who they are, or just inform them and just give them some advice to be a better person or something like that, other than just getting your point of thought, about them, because that's pretty much you're belittling them. You know what I mean? That's not right. So I've gone through that, as far as being belittled or looked down, So I felt that I was not welcomed.
Well, Aaron, that was an interesting place to end the interview, but we edited it that way because of two things. It's number one, very evident that God is at work in Che's story, in his life. But number two, that there are some things holding him back from coming on into Christianity. And one of those things is the people of God.
Yeah.
And how judged he feels. That's in particular why I chose the book Graceful Evangelism. And I personally wanted to learn about how to do evangelism more gracefully. So that's why I chose this book.
Yeah, I share the same sentiments, honestly. It's just when I was evangelized, even though I was a Christian, it was very done to me. I felt like a victim, really, when it was being done to me. But this book takes a really cool approach with graceful evangelism. There are certain assumptions undergirding what graceful evangelism is. First of all, it's not competitive. There's this not competitive nature to it. It's actually reflexive, where you're giving gifts and receiving gifts and so on and so forth. There's a big dimension to listening and identifying with the person, like they're actually a person. And there's always a knowledge, always an assumption that, hey, God has gone before us, and He's the one transforming lives. We don't transform anything, and He's going into these people's lives before us, essentially.
Yeah, so we're going to tackle 8 concepts from this book, maybe more than 8. There's a lot we have written down here. I'll talk about 4, and Aaron will talk about 4. The very first one we want to highlight is just what you were talking about. The author calls it the triadic dimension of evangelism. And this simply means, just to first define this term before we apply it to Che's life, just to define it, the triadic dimension of evangelism means that there's always 3 parties to this act of sharing the gospel and working with someone. And the third party is God. So there's you, the person, and God. The author says it this way on page 134. God has gone before us into every situation. We just need to understand what God is already doing. So God's been at work long before we came on the scene. That's part of graceful evangelism. And I don't know about you, Aaron, but I see that in Che's life quite a bit. He spoke to us about God being active in his life. Even though he doesn't believe Jesus is God, even though he doesn't believe the Bible is the Word of God, he still has this longing to be here at church, hanging out with Christians. Yeah. He wants to be a better dad to his children. He wants to have a good family. He moved back here to Port St. Lucie from North Carolina in part for spirituality and to get his life back going. He wants to obey. We heard that a lot. So God is definitely going before us in Che's life, and that's a key part of illuminating his spiritual journey.
Yeah, and the book really entails like a really good aspect of fulfilling needs outlined by Pearson, and it's this. It's essentially it entails us discovering what he needs in his spiritual journey right now as a walker, that what we can provide essentially, and for us. Love then becomes an action. It becomes more than just words and saying that, Jesus loves you, the church loves you, or whatever. It becomes tangible. And so one of the practical ways that we're doing this is that, he's involved in a whole bunch of things like community and all that stuff we could probably get to in a little bit. But one thing I did want to highlight is that part of what a graceful evangelism is fulfilling needs.
I think Aaron here is being humble. Maybe you won't bring it up, but a lot of the way we're meeting Che's needs are ministries that you've created. Sunlight Hoops, a basketball ministry, is fulfilling a need of his for community, a place to play basketball. He's also working with me because he wants to play drums. And so graceful evangelism, I think it's evaluating those needs and fulfilling them. Yeah. Concept number 3 we want to highlight is abundant life. And I link this to a previous concept by saying what everybody needs and is longing for is full life, is flourishing, is this someone to console them when they're down, someone to rejoice with them when life is good, someone to help them along the way and to discover how the world works. And I see this in Jesus' ministry as well. In John 10:10, Jesus gives what our author calls his mission statement for his ministry and his life. He said, I came that they may have life and have it in abundance, abundantly. Mm-hmm. So the reason Jesus came, he said, was that we might have abundant life in the world. And, I see that in Che as well, that part of that abundant life is we were created for relationships.
Yeah.
We were created for one another. And the author says something insightful about that, too. He says the way we think about ourselves is dependent on the way we see other people think of us.
Yeah.
So he says we only come to know ourselves through seeing how others respond to us. That process of action and response gives us our social bearing.
Yeah.
Page 110. And the fire alarm is going off if you see a strobe light. So just ignore that. The building is not burning down.
Maybe it is.
But that's true. I mean, people get to know who they are based on how other people respond to them. So we are this place for him of abundant life, of showing him that he is a lovable person, a worthwhile person, a person that is worth something. And that's what he's drawn to. The author even says people are drawn to life. So in Che's life, graceful evangelism, what does that look like? It looks like showing him this is where life is, with Jesus, with the church, with God's people. And I think that could work really well with him.
Yeah. Our fourth point that we're going to cover is that the author really highlights a particular model that helps with this, is the missional church model. And it requires us to see into the needs of the community around us and for us to develop theologies and strategies and best practices to help fulfill these needs. So for an example, is that Bill highlighted, is that Sunlight Hoops. All around us right now, basketball is the number one sport in our area. And so we have a basketball gym. So what do? We better have a basketball ministry. And that fulfills a need where we could then minister to these guys on their turf, proverbially, is that we say like, hey, you know what? You play basketball and we'll feed you and show you the love of God. Another way is that the area around us is extremely never churched or unchurched. And so they have a lot of questions. So a strategy and a theology would be one of apologetics, where we would have to have adequate answers and not shy away from questions and make sure that this is a place that is really open to and not shy or scared to answer these questions.
Yeah, and that's all part of being a missional church. I think we do consider ourselves to be a missional church. On mission, our community is our mission field.
Yeah.
I mean, we do missions in Nigeria. We've planted churches in Nigeria. We've helped. But our community here in South Florida, as you know, is one of the most never churched areas in the whole country.
Right.
So it's our mission field, and Che's our mission. Like Aaron said, one of the aspects of that mission is answering questions. As you can tell in the video, he has some misconceptions about God. He has some questions, a lot of questions. He's eager to learn. And that's why I'm so excited about point number 5, which is transforming worldview. As our author puts it, this is basically apologetics, and one of my very favorite methods of evangelism, because it's so important, especially with someone like Che.
Yeah.
But let me get to the definition first. The author says that this is imparting to them a Christian view of who God is and what the world is like and how you're saved. It's discipleship, in short. So on page 87, the author says, the Christian worldview was the best, most relevant, true understanding of the universe, and we believe that's true. Like Peter said in 1 Peter 3:15, we always have to be ready to give a defense for why we're such a hopeful people. And of course that means we have to exude hope in our lives, which we are, hopefully. But our author also points to Paul as an example of transforming worldview. So Peter said, do it. Paul maybe shows us how to do it. And one of my very favorite passages in the Bible, Acts 17, Mars Hill, what does Paul do? He doesn't roll into town and just begin like yelling at people and telling them, you should believe this, you're wrong, everybody's wrong. No, our author says, he began by going into learning mode, going to the markets, talking with the people, visiting their temples, learning their philosophies, and even reading their ancient texts, their philosophers. And based on that, after he'd soaked up their thinking, their mannerisms, and their beliefs, he was able to talk with them on their terms. And I think that's such an effective method of evangelism. I think in Che's case, I don't know if this made the final edit of the video, but he told us some things we can affirm. Yeah. He told us that different religions, they don't all worship the same God. We can affirm that. We can start there. What else did he say? He said there is a heaven and a hell. We can start there. Yeah. There's a lot in his philosophy that we can work with, and then we can build on that to teach him the Christian worldview and where real hope is found. And as the author points out, always with epistemological humility, even as we have ontological certainty, but we need to do that, and we need to do it in a dialogic way. Just like Paul said, you listen, and then you talk. You listen,
yeah.
And then you talk. So that's point 5, transforming worldview.
Yeah, point 6 was really interesting for me, is because as we were listening, we discovered who Che was, and he is this. I don't know what kind of impression you got from him, but to me, he's like a very strong, confident, maybe alpha type of figure, at least in his areas or his circles of friends or family, that people look to him. And so there's point 6 is identifying Che's worldview, and it is one of a self-made man. It's this Americana, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, very individual, very based on your determination. He relies on himself. He's not looking for any handouts, and he really places a high value on what you do to build yourself up, to essentially works-based, to bring value to yourself by what you can provide and what you can do for other people. And I think what the problem is here, especially when you're talking about graceful evangelism, is that his worldview leaves little room for grace. It's very difficult for someone, or probably someone like Che, to say, hey, you know what? I do need something that I can't get from myself. I do need something outside of myself that I can't provide for myself. And as we both know, that's what grace is. It's like where we get something that is completely undeserved, and it's a very hard message for someone who has earned and has, who thinks that he has everything he has because he deserves it.
Yeah, he's worked hard for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what the author calls the self-made man, I think you see a lot of that in Che.
Yeah.
As we begin to wrap up here, we're getting down to concept number 7. And number 7 is multi-directional evangelism. And we've talked a lot about that this semester in our class at Calvin.
Right.
The author puts it this way, one-directional evangelism is a thing of the past. It's not effective. To understand today's complex situations, you have to learn as well as teach.
Yeah.
And there's a related concept, 2 concepts for the price of 1 here. The author uses this term, giftive mission. We're on a giftive mission. We're not selling something, we're giving something.
Absolutely.
But we're also receiving something. So it's a giving and receiving of gifts. And when you do it the right way, this has the effect of combating distrust, of self-aggrandizement. Mm-hmm. It's enabling us to model what Jesus modeled. John 13:5, when he was washing the disciples' feet. What a great model for us. Yeah. Just one way we see the life of Jesus, how he would do evangelism. He washed people's feet, serving humbly, exhibiting love and faith and hope and humility, compassion, honesty, patience, comfort, graceful love, So we see the same thing in Jesus we saw in Paul, which is listening respectfully first, and then bringing people life.
Right.
So that is what the author means by multi-directional evangelism and the giftive mission. And I think it's really important with Che, because if you listen closely to the interview, the problem he has with Christians is they don't listen.
Hypocrites.
They're hypocrites. They want to tell you how to live your life, which is really interesting, because just if you play back the interview, the sentence before that was, I need advice for how to live my life. Yeah. He wants us to tell him what to do, but he's tired of Christians not listening, and he's tired of them telling him what to do. So it's this kind of contradiction, but I think the author nails it when we talk about this multi-directional evangelism. So if we listen first, if we understand him, if we speak with kindness and courtesy, And even the author says charm.
Yeah.
That's all part of graceful evangelism. Jesus had charm.
Yeah.
People wanted to be around him. People wanted to listen.
Charming guy.
And that's something we have to work on. That's what it'll take with someone like Che.
Yeah, and this brings us to our last few points here. And it really combats, I think, that whole hypocritical nature that sometimes evangelism can take. It is point number 8, the emerging church model. It's more like a strategy than anything, but it's where these discussions and ministry and graceful evangelism happens in people's homes, over coffee tables, at pubs. I don't know if you're, that Baptist enough to get back into a pub or not, but that's where I think Che would really find that, hey, he's really comfortable here, and Christians aren't really two-faced, and they're not hypocritical, and they're willing to learn. And that's where I think these, it's the use of being culturally savvy and technology and media, and it's just embracing all this and still being true and authentic and real. And that really adds credibility to what our message is all about, one of grace and hope and the gospel.
Yeah.
So I think that's really it's what real relational authentic Christianity is all about.
Yeah, and related to that, like bonus point 9, we'll call it, just a real quick one, just observability is
Right.
what the author says happens when you're honest with people.
Yeah.
One of the things Che wants to see is a non-hypocritical Christian, and he said he was impressed that he had seen some Christians who really did change their lives.
Yeah.
And so observability is something. Triability is something. You can observe that we are a people of hope, and we're just with this simple invitation: come and see,
For sure.
come and taste, come and try it out,
Yeah.
try it out. So that's in sum Che's story and how this book sheds light on his spiritual journey. I really do think that Jesus offers him the substantial peace he's looking for, the hope, the way of life, the truth that he's seeking, and the book has, as you've just seen, at least 9, 10, 11 different ways that we can do well at communicating that to him. And I hope that helps some people out there watching as well.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for tuning in with us. Please be in prayer for our ministries as we are in prayer for yours. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya, thanks.